If you've ever been freaked out by astrology, by an astrology podcast, by an astrology reading you've had, by an astrological forecast you've been given, by something you've seen in your own birth chart, this week's episode is for you. Fear no more. So this week, I'm excited to welcome to the show someone in Virginia in the USA and someone in, I believe, Tokyo in Japan, and I'm here in London, Kathy Rose and Hiroki Niizato. So let me just tell you about them before I bring them on. Kathy has spent 4 decades guiding clients with her intuitive therapeutic approach to astrology. She teaches for a multitude of people, including Astrology University, which we're going to be talking about today, and Kepler College, which some of you may have heard of, and also reaches thousands of people through her very popular YouTube channel called The Maverick Podcast. So I do love a Maverick, so I'm very happy to hear about this podcast. And Hiroki is a highest honours graduate of Noel Till's Master Certification Program, and it's been consulting for, well, let's see, it must be 24 years. It'll be 25 years next year. He teaches as well for a multitude of people and also runs a 3-year psychological astrology program in Tokyo. So together, they're actually launching a 5-part seminar, which we're going to talk about. But first of all, before we get to that, I believe you guys call yourselves humanistic astrologers. Now, I've been around the block. I've been doing astrology for at least a quarter of a century, but I don't think I really could give you a definition of humanistic astrology. Tell me, how would you guys, as humanistic astrologers, how would you define that? And then we're going to talk about this week's astrology, including a new moon in Leo conjunct in the same place as Mercury, which is retrograde. And maybe we'll be able to look at that a bit through a humanistic lens. So who wants to go first so we don't talk over the top of each other? Hiroki, it's up to you.
I define it as a kind of a contrast to the fatalistic astrology that was very common in the traditional sense. And one example is if Saturn is placed prominent in your horoscope, then it probably means bad things because they're called malefic. Saturn and Mars are malefic, and that means bad things. If they form an aspect, a hard aspect to something in your chart, that's called an affliction, and that also sounds very bad. So that's the fatalistic astrology, where if you have a certain placement like that in your chart, that does not bode well for you in general. Humanistic astrology gives the power to create your life back to the people, the human will and choices. So then it's more about understanding what the planet is, let's say, forcing us or teaching us or showing us or leading us to learn and grow. And then so once we are freed from that idea of afflictions and the benefics and malefics, then we look at each symbol from all sides, both positive expressions, negative expressions, underdeveloped expressions, and then well-developed, matured expressions. And then so everything becomes more like an unfolding story of your potential. So it might start out as something challenging, but it can end up being your greatest strength. So that's the way we think in humanistic astrology.
Okay, so I am an accidental humanistic astrologer. I didn't know that that's what I am, but now I have a word for it. I just call myself Pollyanna. Okay, that's amazing. I love it. I love it. Okay, so like one thing that we know as astrologers is that the idea of fatalistic astrology has basically been around for, millennia, and, a plague of locusts shall infect your home if you have this, or you're going to die like this if you've got such and such. When did humanistic astrology, arise, and from where?
Well,
Kathy,
Dane,
feel free to jump in, but my major influence was reading Dane Rudhyar's books, and then I think he used the word humanistic astrology. Even I'm not 100% be sure about that, but I think his readings on his books were the most influential in informing me about the style of thinking that we are discussing now.
yes, certainly Dane Rudhyar was the beginning of it. And then Noel Till, who was our biggest influence, jumped in and brought psychological, humanistic, therapeutic astrology to the forefront. And he began to do that very powerfully in the 80s and 90s. And Noel was kind of a maverick in bringing all kinds of new ideas, especially psychological therapeutic astrology, into the forefront, which, says you don't want to forget the human in the horoscope. People tend to think I am my chart, and I don't think I am my chart. I am a soul who has a chart for this moment, and that chart is saying what I am working on, healing and resolving and developing. So the humanistic part is remember the human in the horoscope.
I mean, I'm not joking. I'm feeling like a release of all these years of telling myself this because I know it's true, but never having put words to it. I'll be completely frank. I mean, I feel like I've read nearly every single really important astrologer, but Noel Till is not one of them. I really came across him when I was first learning astrology with the solar return charts. I didn't know that he'd sort of developed this sort of different take, which is so heartening in a world where there are so many, traditional astrologers who are like kind of pouring a lot of scary stuff in. Am I allowed to say that in this world?
For sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Negative predictions, limiting predictions. And I've received many in years past when I wanted to study some of the big famous astrologers and I wanted to see how they did their consultations. I would schedule with them and I received many negative predictions. You will never be married. You will never have children. Or once I was married, you will be divorced in a year. And none of it was accurate because
I've actually had both of those as well, and they were both not true.
Yeah. Yeah. So the fear-based astrology and the predictive model is not, certainly you can forecast, but that is basing it on the fact that people have free will and they can choose how to use these energies, and we can guide them and educate them on which energies are coming in and where that development can lie.
Okay. So out of a purely self-referential perspective, but also because Saturn has just changed signs, and we all fear the Saturn square. Let's just take as a random example a Saturn square to your sun or your moon or both. I mean, how, for people who are like any of the cardinal signs like Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, they're about to get a Saturn square. What would you say to those people, for example?
Well, I don't fear Saturn, first of all. And I don't fear a square or an opposition or a conjunction from any planets. But when Saturn, the way I look at it is you are receiving the frequency of Saturn. And what is the frequency of Saturn? Saturn requires hard work, perseverance, determination, and discipline. And depending on which planet it is contacting, you are going to be having those vibes of hard work, discipline, inner accountability flowing through you. And it's unfortunate that people fear it. And it's unfortunate when they Google search these aspects and decide in advance that it's going to be difficult, because then if you decide it's going to be difficult, it absolutely will be difficult. The self-fulfilling prophecy comes into form. So if you have Saturn getting ready to contact by conjunction, square, or opposition any of your cardinal planets, look forward to it. It's a time frame to grow. It's a time frame to get committed to your own growth in a new way. And Hiroki, you probably have something to add.
Maybe, Hiroki, tell us, what about for people who've got it natally, which, by the way, I don't. I like Saturn, kind of, touch wood. I'm always worried to tempt fate when I say things like that. But if someone's got it natally, what would you say, Hiroki?
So yeah, I write about a lot about Saturn aspects in my blog. But typically, if it's like a hard aspect contact to the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, let's say, you tend to experience it during your childhood as some kind of a difficult interaction that you have, maybe with your father, which is a very common Saturn expression, or other authority figures, other adults in your life, because the principle of Saturn, the rules, control, restraints, suppression, is forming very dynamic aspect to one of your personal planets while in the formative stage. So that might be experienced as something that was challenging. But then you kind of need to think about what happens as a result. Let's say, and I know there are so many different ways that you experience this, but as you grow, then you start encountering, let's say, some positive authority figures that challenges you to grow. And then they're hard. They expect a lot from you, but then it's causing you to reach higher because of that higher expectation. No, I know you can do better than this. It's that kind of energy. So then you could have a positive Saturn figure, the mentor figure, that might end up pulling you even like your potential even higher. I mean, that is a potential. But let's say even if you weren't fortunate enough to have that during your growth years, that could still happen in your 20s, maybe in your Saturn return, maybe in your 30s. And then the meaning that you give to this Saturn aspect changes, and it absolutely becomes something that tests you, but it will allow you to grow and develop the potential of the aspected planet. So then, again, we think of it like an unfolding story of your potential.
I just can't tell you how much I love this. I would like to have the whole soundtrack of this podcast be cheering, people cheering. So, Hiroki, are you saying that it will often unfold in the childhood just because that's as we become conscious, then our chart will start to play out? So it's not a matter of looking at progressions or something like that. It's like, well, we'll start to experience all these things as children, which is obviously then probably why a lot of people have big childhood issues as they grow up.
There's a reason for that, because I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a reason for that, because when we are babies, we don't have our Saturn. Like, we have no ability to take care of ourselves in the material world. We have no self-discipline. We are just, crying and being dependent. So somebody else has to play out that role for you, in terms of creating that structure and safety in your life. Same thing with the moon. You cannot nurture or feed yourself. So then usually your mother or, other adults will have to provide for you and show you what nurturing and affection means for you in their best way, right? And then that becomes the template of how you create security in your own life, or how you create emotional security for yourself, Saturn and the moon. And then they develop, but of course our parents and adults are imperfect, which is why the childhood issue comes up. But the main idea with the childhood whole situation is that our planets are not developed as our own. We experience it through other people around us, which is why this tends to be difficult. And then you tend to gain more power and awareness, and we integrate and absorb more powers of those planets within ourselves. So we have more control over how we express our Saturn, how we express our moon.
Mm-hmm. Just interject and say this concept of how we can look in the horoscope and how we can see developmental tension in our childhood through the mother and father symbols is something we focus on intensely in the course that Hiroki and I teach. And not from looking at it, oh, you have a bad mother or a father problem, but what does that teach you? How is that going to help your learning? How is that part of your development and your life purpose? So you can easily see mother and father statements in the horoscope. And we spent a long time teaching about that in the course.
And thank you, Kathy. And just a clarifying question here. So we're talking about Saturn and we're talking about childhood and so on. Is that same if you had, say, I don't know, Pluto squaring your Mars? Would you still be expecting to experience that in childhood, or are you saying Saturn in particular for childhood?
I think Saturn in particular has role to play during your childhood, because this is the disciplinarian in your chart. It shows you where your boundaries and rules are. Pluto is a little different. Yeah, because it can express itself as a major, like either internal power that even during your childhood, you can express that in a very strong way if your Mars and Pluto are in aspect with each other. But you might not experience it as your father necessarily. It might be something that's coming from within you.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
So let's turn our minds to this week's astrology. I want to get to the new moon in a minute, but one of the astrological phenomena that everybody seems to know about these days, and a lot of people are very worried about. I have one particular friend who, she won't do anything while Mercury is retrograde. And I try to say to her, listen, sometimes it can be a good thing. Sometimes you get a second chance. Sometimes you can wrap something up from a previous cycle and so on and so forth. So what about you guys? How do you see Mercury retrograde through a humanistic lens?
I have spent many, many years on social media trying to re-educate people about social media. And I have a meme I put out that says, release your fear of Mercury retrograde. And I have another meme that says, Mercury may be retrograde, but I'm not. And it really focuses on the fact that if Mercury retrograde is going to contact by conjunction a planet in your chart, and for the month of July, Mercury begins the retrograde at 15 degrees Leo and then goes direct or ends the retrograde at 4 degrees Leo. So if you have a planet between 4 and 15 degrees Leo and Mercury is going to make that conjunction, that's a super powerful, wonderful, productive time for you to process and rethink or reorganize. I mean, but I have to say, I bought a brand new car when Mercury was retrograde. I've bought a computer. I've taken trips across the country. It does not affect me. It does not scare me. And it's very unfortunate that for the past, 15 years, 20 years, what we've seen on social media is expect delays, expect problems. Your vacuum cleaner will break. Your computer will break. I really disagree with that on so many levels. That's fear-based astrology, and it's saying planets do things, and it's really more people do things. Planets don't.
So interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, okay. And what about, so this week, so are you saying you don't think Mercury retrograde affects anyone apart from if it's conjoining one of their planets? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think in general, the background energy can have a Mercury retrograde feel, but I always say this, whether it hits your chart or not, when Mercury is retrograde, bring your flexibility forward. So for example, if you're going to take a trip and Mercury's retrograde, pack your flexibility in your suitcase and keep that attitude and go with the flow and be ready to pivot. If there is a change in your airline schedule, or, if you miss the train to get to an event, be flexible, pivot, stay lighthearted. It's when you expect problems that you're going to get problems, and when you can't make adjustments that there will be problems. But this blaming the planets for everything is something I disagree with. I've had many Mercury retrogrades where I had nothing. I wouldn't know it was Mercury. And my challenge is, if you don't know it's retrograde, are you going to experience anything?
I will tell you, I did research this slightly once upon a time, and there is a New York Times article you can look up where one of the journalists went out and to like Kennedy Airport or whatever it's called, or LaGuardia or whatever the big airport in New York is, to see if there was more luggage lost during Mercury retrograde, and there was. But, maybe all those people. I don't think you're negating Mercury retrograde. You're just saying don't think it has to be bad. It could be rethink, redo, revisit, revamp, revise, all those sorts of things, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the symbolism manifests on many levels, right? So, okay, maybe some things tend to, go wrong, or the luggage gets lost, or something like that. But on a very different level, it could be a very meaningful time period. I like the energy of Mercury retrograde. I think it's a more introspective time period that might
Yes.
allow me to go deeper inside and then maybe get more ideas or think a little bit more quietly. And so I think in any type of transit situations, there's an appropriate activity that you can make things work better for you. And I think in terms of having the Mercury retrograde in July, I mean, I think I'll be, writing a lot and maybe thinking and planning, what I will create next. But it's like the breathing in time period of breathing in inspiration or information and then thinking, developing your thoughts, maybe, writing it out. And so all of those internally focused activity that can be productive for you, I think that those are great to engage in during Mercury retrograde.
And are you saying as well about rethinking what I can create in particular because it's Mercury retrograde in the very creative sign of Leo?
I think that's great. Yeah. Works.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, in the sign of Leo, then it might be about how do I express myself fully, and because it might pertain to the solar, life purpose oriented expression.
I am so on board with humanistic astrology. I can't even tell you. That's incredible. I can't believe this sort of bypassed me. Maybe it's because I haven't really looked into psychological astrology. Do they go hand in hand?
Yes, I think they do. Yeah.
Yes, psychological astrology is a development that came after humanistic astrology, and I think most people use the word psychological astrology nowadays, but Dane Rudger was a major influence for everybody that's writing in that field.
Okay. So I did want to ask you actually about the future of astrology, because I know that's something that you guys think about. And I just wondered, what are your thoughts on this? I actually wrote down a question, and it kind of is already what you've referred to in a way. We are surrounded by bite-sized sun sign wisdom on social media. So how do you see serious, psychologically, let's say, or humanistically oriented astrology evolving and staying relevant in a world of quick hit astrology memes where, things like may your Mercury be more Freddie than retrograde? Or no, have I got that right? May your Mercury retrograde be more Freddie Mercury? You know the meme.
I think it begins with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. We are beginning a significant new cycle, especially with Neptune in Aries. And I think that has a lot to do with self-reliance and self-sufficiency and accountability, as opposed to blaming. When we had Neptune in Pisces, the whole victim energy came forward quite a bit. First, it started with compassion for those who are victimized, and that's legitimate and powerful and important. But then it also went into jumping into embracing victim, like the planets do something to me. It's changing now with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, especially since Neptune will spend 14 years in Aries, and making positive aspects to Uranus and Gemini soon, and Pluto in Aquarius. And I think that goes more to accountability and self-sufficiency, which says, guess what? I can steer these energies where I need them to go. I have some agency here. I can use these energies that are hitting me, flowing through me, and I can make choices as to how this might manifest in my life, as opposed to, oh, Pluto's going to hit my chart, therefore everything's going to end and it's going to be terrible. I can say, maybe I can steer this to release what's not working and receive empowerment. So I think astrology is moving more in that direction.
Right. And so when you come up against traditional astrologers like, say, Robert Hand, who I'm a huge fan of, but who is a bit, famously, dark and slightly, very traditional, how do they take all this? Do they make light of it? Do they think you are being a bit of a Pollyanna? Do they go, well, actually, it's a very good thing? Or what do you get?
I mean, Robert Hand's history is he is pretty much a pretty humanistic astrologer, but delved deeply into the traditional world, and so I think his understanding is actually quite well rounded. And I haven't heard him make extreme statements like you hear on the internet. In fact, I like one of I took many of his courses, but I like his saying like planets don't do things; they just tell you what time it is. So yeah, I think that he is very much aware of the humanistic way of
Yeah.
thinking.
I mean,
So,
to be fair, I'm thinking of his book Planets in Transit, which we all bought, as soon as we started learning astrology. And there are some quite challenging things in there. Whenever I have a friend who's delving into astrology for the first time, and, I might want to send them a photocopy of that to understand their transit. But I always say, take it with a pinch of salt. It's a little bit intense or whatever. But maybe that was before he got into the humanistic thing.
Well, it is still a little bit humanistic in that it was a classic effort to incorporate some of the psychological thinking into the transit delineation, and then it is kind of dated, but yeah, there was a psychological element that he introduced into it. But the thing is, you can practice psychological astrology from a fatalistic attitude, and it's not that Robert Hand was doing it that way, but a lot of the students that are reading the cookbook descriptions will take it so hard. Whatever descriptions that he's using, they take it in a very rigid, narrow way. So there's no flexibility. So yeah, I mean, I sympathize for anybody that has to write those cookbook delineations because it's so limiting. But students, as they grow, they need to understand there are more layers to that understanding, so I think that's part of my mission in thinking about the future of astrology and communicating how best to think about the symbolism.
Yeah.
So that it's a little bit more
another
nuanced.
of his quotes comes to mind, which is, there are some transits that most people experience as easy, and there are some transits that most people experience as challenging. But you can try to sort of, I can't remember the exact wording he used, but you can try and sort of work with them. So I suppose that is his more humanistic side coming out like that. Well, I've learned something really, I've been doing astrology for 25 years. I think I just didn't ever look into this aspect. Noel Till was presented on a silver platter to me 25 years ago, but I've just never really gotten to solar returns. And so I never really went further with it in a way. But not that this is about me, but I am just going to say this chat today has changed me. And I'm not even joking. Awesome. It's like it's unlocked something that I've always not been happy about with astrology, that thing of condemning people, dooming them, making them feel doomed. And if anything, I've
totally
gone the
hear
other
you.
way.
Yeah.
And I work with angels and goddesses almost as a way of trying to show people how to alleviate the more challenging, traditionally considered challenging aspects. So for me, but for anyone else who's listening, which is the first book to read then? Is it a Dane Rudhyar one? Because I work with the moon a lot, as you know. So obviously I've read the lunation cycle 5 million times. But what are you talking about?
I think Dane Rudhyar is challenging to read unless you have really gotten a good base in astrology. But, and most of Noel Till's books are out of print, unfortunately. It's really sad. His books were brilliant and he was very prolific. You can get them used, but they're very expensive now. And that's why Hiroki and I decided to do the course that we've done with Astrology University, is to keep Noel's teaching and to add our own wisdom, because we've both been consulting astrologers for so many years. And to keep the simplicity, to keep the therapeutic, psychological, humanistic approach going, so that people can view astrology differently and use it differently in their life and say, what am I learning in this lifetime, as opposed to what will happen to me? I think we're trying to rewire people from saying the planets cause events. And I go, planets don't cause events, people cause events. Planets create waves of development, and then we choose what we do with it. And a lot of people get pretty upset when I challenged the model of planets cause events, because there are layers of people who want to be able to blame the planets. It's easier. Let me blame the planet. My vacuum broke. It's Mercury's fault. And I say that's the only time it can break, right? When Mercury's retrograde.
I had someone told me once, I'm not really scared of Mercury retrograde, but it did once give me appendicitis.
Oh, God.
So have you guys got some books that we should read apart from doing your course, which we'll talk about in a minute? Have you written any books yet to for us to start with, or we just have to do the course?
I write a lot of articles on my blog, so a lot of people like it. And not a lot of people talk about symbolism in the way that we are talking about, so that might be a good introduction too.
Okay. Hiroki's blog is incredible. He is a gifted writer, and what he has written, I highly recommend. And I haven't written a book. Yeah, what is your blog, Hiroki?
I guess its easiest thing is to Google my name, Hiroki, but Niizato .com, Niizato.com, and I know it's a hard spelling, so it might be easier.
You're going to have to come up with a catchy title for the.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but probably just type in my name, Hiroki, and then put astrology, and then you can find me easier that way.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. That's a very good idea. So type in Hiroki and astrology. It's like me. You can type in Yasmin and astrology, and you'll find me.
Exactly.
All right, so let us talk about what's in the course. Let's start by saying who the course is for and who it's not for.
What I like to focus on is if somebody can look at a chart and know what they are looking at, if they can understand the glyphs for the planets, if they understand the signs, if they know houses, or at least have some idea of the houses. And even if they don't fully understand aspects yet, we go through this step by step, but you do have to be able to know the signs and the planets. And then we go through, it's actually 11 presentations. So we started off calling it a 5-part course. And then there was so much information, we broke it into 11 presentations. So it's I think like 12 hours of learning in the course, called 9 Powerful Keys for Chart Interpretation. And so we have a section on mother and father signatures. We have a section on aspects and how to look at them so that they don't scare you, and how to understand them. We have a section on houses and the psychological meaning of the houses, which can blow your mind. It's very, very different. For example, the 11th house is not just friends, goals, hopes, and wishes, but in psychological astrology, if you have planets in the 11th house under high developmental tension, it can suggest lovability issues. That in this lifetime, you are here to learn you deserve to be loved, or you are lovable. Second house can suggest you are learning about self-worth. So it becomes very helpful. It doesn't doom you to certain experiences. It says, this is what you are learning. And so we go through all of that. It's very detailed. And I just don't think we could help ourselves. We went really deep, which is why
we went very deep. It's sophisticated stuff, but each key is pretty simple to understand. And then as you combine them into your own understanding, you'll be able to look at a chart in a completely new way. My only recommendation is to just try to leave the preconceptions and maybe what you have learned so far, and then try to have a very open mind as you dive into the course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just to go back to a question we asked at the beginning, so you're saying that Noel Till was really the springboard for all this. Did he just sort of invent it, or how did it all come about? Because it is the divergent thing.
So here's where I have a podcast called the Maverick Podcast. And I mention that because I am a maverick myself, meaning I think outside the box. I question the rules. I question tradition. Well, Noel was a powerful maverick mind, and he came up with new theories in astrology. One of his theories was about Saturn retrograde in the natal chart, suggesting that father may have been absent, passive, or didn't show the leadership necessary. It's not a hard
and fast. Which now just seems so obvious.
Yeah, it's not a hard and fast absolute rule, but it's there's a suggestion and mother issues that also come forward with the moon and with the nodal axis and so forth. So he applied psychology. He went to Harvard. He was a very gifted, intelligent man, and he proposed new theories. And I think this is what needs to happen as culture grows, as awareness grows, as we evolve. New theories and new ways to look at astrology needs to come forward also. So Noel he just had that kind of brain, and he just brought it forward, and he was very charming and a great speaker and got a lot of attention for it.
What sign was he?
Capricorn.
And did he have any strong Uranus placements?
Yes.
Or do you?
Yes, he did. And that is the signature for maverick energy, is when Uranus stands out in the chart, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, well, it all sounds fantastic. So with the course, that's just been released. So if anybody wants to sign up for it, they go to Astrology University and probably just type in 9 keys and they'll get the course, won't they?
Yes. And the course is recorded, so they can go at their own pace. There are going to be live Q&As, but if they're not taking the course when we do the first round of live Q&As, those Q&As will be recorded also.
And how many hours altogether are there, Kathy?
More than 11 hours. It's nearly 12 hours of learning.
Amazing. Right. Well, what would you like to finish off by saying? Let's finish by talking about the new moon, because I'm very much into the new moon and the new beginnings and then setting intentions and so on. What would you like to? Let's finish by mentioning the fantastic new moon we have coming up this week, taking place exactly opposite Pluto.
Mm-hmm. And that's the main statement, that it's opposite Pluto. And it's also a main statement that Mercury during this retrograde is going to activate the Mars retrograde that happened when Mars was in Cancer and Leo. Because remember, Mars went back and forth over those degrees in Leo. So the developmental wave that we had from, let's say, October until just recently, when Mars reactivated those degrees in the early part of May, the developmental wave that we went through during that time is going to be punctuated and developed to the next level in July at this new moon. It's like we get to consolidate and organize and integrate what we went through from that Mars retrograde that happened in Cancer and Leo.
And so are you thinking it's going to be like a mental processing of what you went through during that Mars retrograde? Yeah.
Very likely, yes.
Okay.
And with the Pluto opposition to the new moon, I think usually we think about the power issues. If you don't have power and you're projecting it to others, then you are a victim. There's a victim feeling to that because you're projecting power to somebody else. Oh, he's doing something wrong, she's doing something wrong, or the politicians are doing something wrong. So then you don't have power. So then can you integrate that power back into yourself? Things like that.
And in my accidental humanistic approach, what I wrote about in advance in my Moonology diary, which I wrote 1.5 years ago, I wrote also about, for me, Pluto can be about detoxing as well. So it can be about trying to get rid of any negativity, especially, pride or mental negativity, stuff like that, because we've got the retrograde in Leo and the new moon and so on. So we all agree, I think.
I love that.
You're nodding, so that's good. Okay, amazing. I just want to finish with one last question, just because it did occur to me, and I'm not trying to, bait you into saying something negative, but I feel like that's the risk of this question. But I am curious, because we just talked about power, and this question did occur to me about a few minutes ago. Do you think that there is a certain power in astrologers sometimes making very negative, fear-based predictions? Is there a power that they derive from that, do you think? And it's time to sort of get rid of that.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely very harmful. I think both Kathy and I received a lot of clients that were terrorized by other astrologers' negative predictions. And then we try to bring back a more balanced perspective, let's say. But yeah, I don't know what that is and why people choose to express astrology in that way. But maybe because they truly believe that these negative things will happen to their clients or their readers, and it's just to me, I study a lot of Pluto and Saturn expressions, transits, and natal, and to me, it's not a very well studied perspective to say these horrible things.
And what about fixed stars? Because they're nearly all the 100% diabolical predictions.
Yeah, I think also need to study very, very well especially about people that are doing well, people that are successful, and then they have these significant fixed stars emphasized in their chart. So what does that mean? That probably means our understanding will have to be updated, right? Not stay in the medieval era.
Yasmin, all I have to say is in my natal chart, my ascendant is conjunct Algol. And when I go to conferences and I show my chart, sometimes people get big eyes and back away slowly. and I think, oh, they don't know me. They're making a judgment. They're thinking I'm controlled by that placement, and it's very far from the truth. I have a lot of patience and I have a slow burn temper. It takes a long time for me to get upset. But, so Algol gets a very bad rap.
Of all the fixed stars, Algol's the one I've studied the most. And I can tell you, using Bernadette Brady's delineation of Algol as not to be feared for being powerful, it's very much equated to divine feminine power, and which was obviously feared by the patriarchy. And it's the decapitation, it's connected to Medusa. And the decapitation of Medusa is seen by goddess scholars, and I've spoken to many of them, as the decapitation of the matriarchy. So it's a very powerful placement, and it's one that I've studied. And so when you said, I think, Hiroki, you said, have a look at people who've got these difficult placements, I've done a full, robust study of Algol, and I can tell you it's a good thing. It's just,
the whole thing about the whole thing about the divine feminine being suppressed in mainstream spiritual thinking, and that's also an important point too. And then maybe we need to look at some of the symbolism closely to find out what actually is going on.
So now I have goosebumps. Okay. Well, before I start gushing too much, let me just say, I think your course sounds amazing. I'm going to recommend everybody does it. I may do it myself. And thank you so much for being here. Let me know your website addresses if you have them. And I say them now, and then I'll put them in the show notes description as well.
Mine is roseastrology.com. Mine's easy. roseastrology.com. My YouTube channel is roseastrology.com, and I put out forecast videos every month, and I have a lot of videos, and that's where my Maverick podcast also can be found.
And your divine feminine energy that's coming off your ascendant with your Algol.
Thank you.
And Rose, what a great name for someone with Algol conjunct their ascendant. When you look at it through that way. So that's my dog getting a bit excited. I don't know if you can hear.
That's wonderful. That's a perfect timing.
My website is
Niizato.com,
but probably easier to Google Hiroki and then astrology. That's it.
Okay. All right. Well, on that rather barky, loud note, thank you so much for being here, and good luck with the course and good luck with everything.
Thank you for having us, Yasmin.
Yes, it was very nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you.